Please note that Counselor Di Lorenzo will join us a little bit later. Um, and I'm sure Counselor Wong will join us later as well. At this time, I'm going to go ahead and turn the meeting over to our town manager.
Thank you. Thank you, Mayor. We have a series of slides that we're going to be showing that'll be going over essentially both our revenues and our capital improvement program recommendations for this forthcoming year. As you know, with the revenue side, the majority, and I'll go to page 2. Nancy Haynes will be assisting me here with the slide presentations. Page 2 outlines essentially the major categories of revenues that we have. Taxes and assessments is by far the largest of any of our revenue classifications and categories. And as I've said in the past, the 6 New England states, through their colonial heritage, have inherited the property tax, and the states take the income and sales taxes. If you go outside of New England, there's a lot more flexibility and options available for both states and municipalities to share in the different revenue structures that generate most of the tax revenue in the country and in our individual states and local governments. So our taxes and assessments, our grand list, as I've handed out to you in the past, went up 1.05%, and that takes into account the reserve for appeals and uncollectibles and so forth. We're still recovering from the revaluation. Last year, we had $75 million reserved as a potential appeal fund, if you will, in terms of valuation. And this year we've reduced it to 50. So without that $50 million of anticipated appeals on our grand list, we would have had a 2.17% increase. But right now the net is 1.05. So going down the categories, you've got various other forms of revenue. We have state education grants. We have state property tax relief. We have other state and federal grant monies come in. These are usually classified as intergovernmental sources of revenue. I would just throw up a cautionary statement at this time concerning the money that's going to be coming from the $1.9 trillion federal act. That is, the town will receive slightly over $2 million from that, possibly over 2 years. We won't receive it necessarily all in 1 year. And I think I've forwarded to you the list of conditions and restrictions on where that money can be spent. It specifically says it cannot be spent to lower the tax rate, and it cannot be spent to offset pension expenditures that would be due for pension funds. There's a wide variety of other uses that you can use the money for, and a lot of them relate to social services and individual issues relating to rent, evictions, small businesses, and others. And as this becomes more clear as we go along, we may go ahead and obviously keep you apprised of things, but also institute potentially some new programs that the money allows. I think you always have to be careful of dependency creations on the part of intergovernmental revenues, whether they're from the state or from the federal government, or even from private nonprofit sectors, because you can become dependent on those and then they end or change and create a problem in your budget. The use of assets is another category that is down significantly, but that's because the town in the current budget year used an $800,000 premium payment on bonds that were sold. And so that was a one-time revenue source, and it will not be continued, obviously, into the current year. There's miscellaneous revenues, licenses and permits, fees and service charges and so forth that we have. I think the major sources there tend to be building permit fees, which we've left the same at 800,000. And we'll get into some of these in more detail in a few minutes. In addition to that, we have increased conveyance taxes. We went back, the staff did in the finance department, and looked at a 7-year trend to try to get a better feel for where we should be budgeting those items. And we've made some adjustments upward or kept things flat based upon prior experiences. So let's go on to the next slide, slide 3. As I indicated, taxes are the major source, and the increase is by 6.32% this year. But of course, this comes from not only real estate taxes, it comes from automobile taxes and supplemental taxes. It includes interest on past due taxes and other things. So there is a significant increase at this time in that component. Interest and liens, prior year collections, and supplemental motor vehicles are also increased based on a 7-year average. So let's go to number 4. The ECS, or Education Cost Sharing Grant, which is the major educational grant that the state provides municipalities. We've left that flat based on the governor's budget. You'll see as we go through here, any of these intergovernmental grants, particularly from the state, we've left pretty much as to what the governor has put in his budget. We won't know exactly what we're going to get until after the state budget is approved, probably in late April or into May, depending upon how they progress through their legislative agenda. Non-public health services was reduced to 40% due to cap. Next page, please, Nancy. Okay, as I just indicated, most grants in the state grants and property tax relief category are based on the governor's budget. Decreases are based on current year estimates, and they're revised accordingly. Next slide. All are, again, have been held flat with the exception of the police grant, which is based on a salary and adjusted to be reflective of the current year. Next slide, please. Interest on investments has been reduced by 1/3 to reflect lower interest rates as a result of the state of the economy. Interest rates have notched up a little bit in the last month or so. So we may, depending upon how things are going in next year's budget, and that will depend upon potentially inflationary impacts and other economic decisions. We've taken an opportunity to reduce that at this time, being prudent. I mentioned the one-time bond premium from last year is not available, obviously, this year. Miscellaneous receipts, we've reduced that by 70,000 as prior year constraints and several one-time revenue sources aren't expected in 2022. Licenses and permits, I mentioned building permit revenue has been held flat at 800,000 based on current year trend. We do have a couple of large projects that are in the permit queue at the moment, which if they do get approval and do get off the ground, could give us a boost in this particular category. Those projects include the 250 apartment unit project on Bloomfield Avenue, adjacent or across the street from the Heirloom Flats property. They include the subdivision, 110 units on Jolly Drive that are going in. They also include the 40,000 square foot office building, and I believe 40 units off of Cottage Grove Road, adjacent to where the health district offices are. So depending upon how rapidly those come in and in which year, we may see a boost above the 800,000. Fees and service charges, most categories we've gone ahead and left them flat. Real estate transaction tax, conveyance tax, we've increased that based on a 5-year historical analysis. Okay, is that? So that's pretty much at this point the revenue picture going through these major categories. I'd be happy to answer any questions that the council may have on revenues in general at this point, if there are any. Okay, I guess there aren't any. We can always come back to that.
Hold on, Phil. There are a couple hands up.
Okay.
I wish we had gotten those slides prior to, then you'd have probably got a little bit more questions. But I do see the Deputy Mayor and Councilor Goff. So Deputy Mayor and then Councilor.
Thanks, Madam Mayor. Yeah, Phil, we're all struggling to figure out how much of the federal money will have a budgetary impact. In other words, you've said some of it is not to be used for certain things, and therefore I assume they would not ordinarily fall under the budget categorization. But there's got to be some of it because there's a considerable amount of money, and we may not be fully aware, although we know what the amount of money is that we're supposed to be getting. And we've seen those guidelines. I guess we read them through CCM or some other place. But at what point will we be really able to make a determination as to what, if any, of that amount of money could be used to, I wouldn't say supplant, but to become part of the budget?
There may be some. I was hoping we had a briefing scheduled with Senator Murphy for Friday, which had to be canceled due to his scheduling requirements. And I was going to ask him at that point in time exactly what he thought in terms of both timing of receipt of the money and secondly, flexibility in terms of use. If there is anything that sticks out right at the moment in terms of potential issues, and it may be more in the social and youth services area, in Camilla Hillion's department, maybe some in the senior services area. It's heavily weighted towards support of individuals, small businesses, and in particular in the business category, and nonprofit organizations, and those organizations which have, and businesses and individuals that have suffered most due to COVID. And I'm always a little bit leery about the post-grant reporting requirements. As you may remember, just this past year, we received a significant grant amount that we got from FEMA for the October 2011 snowstorm. So, you know, that's almost 10 years later, 9 years later. And so you never know who's going to be auditing you. Another example, not to drag on too long here, but is the whole school retainage money that we got from the state, which has taken a long time, and some monitoring and pushing to get that released, to get it back. So I'm waiting to see. I think we'll see they're anxious to get that money out into the economy and into people's hands and to relieve some of the stress and burden that's been created by the COVID pandemic. So I'm anticipating we should get some pretty good clarification, somewhat more probably within the next month to 6 weeks. But right now I'd be a little bit careful in terms of how we use it. And I don't know when we're going to get it. I heard a report a week ago, Wednesday, that it's going to come in 2 segments over 2 years. So we may only get $1 million in the current round, and then another $1 million a year from now. So we have to see what's going on. But it's good news that it's at least in the pipeline.
Yeah, excuse me, one more thought. There were 3 items that came to mind that could have capital improvement purposes: water, sewer, and school enhancement for student use or ventilation or anything to improve the health of the environment. So those are the thoughts that we could certainly put in use somehow. But thanks for your explanation.
Well, one of the interesting things about the water sewer thing, because obviously we get our water and sewage coverage from the MDC, and I don't know if some of that could be used secondarily on any of the projects that they're using. I don't know where exactly they fit into this particular puzzle at the moment. Also, an interesting item that has been of interest to the community for some time, and we've just, through Scott Charlot's initiative, just made some important advances, and that's to provide broadband service. That's obviously a priority for a lot of communities, and I know we've been doing investigative work working with CCM on a state consortium to try to get a policy in place at the state level and perhaps some funding to support it. So it may be that is something that we look at as well. Scott has recently, and I'll let him talk about it later when we get into the capital improvement program, but he's already at the library, both libraries, the Human Service Center and the Town Hall, expanded out our signal, if you will, so that people can access the internet and so forth from an area around each of these buildings. Kevin, did you have a question? Or?
Yes, thank you. I think the deputy mayor is done. Two things. One, just a short follow up on that, because I think most council members have read the guidance and you've sort of reiterated it. My one question on that was, it does make the point about infrastructure. It says water, sewer, and broadband. Do you think that is exclusively those, or do you think it would include other infrastructure projects with utilities? So, for example, we've talked a lot about, in some areas, burying utility lines, and some projects burying utility lines for reliability. Do you think it would include that? It states those three, but it says infrastructure. So,
well, my experience with grants is if it's specifically allowed, it may not be disallowed, okay, if it's not mentioned, but you have to be really careful in terms of how you interpret it and how you relate it. So if there were specific things that we wanted to apply it to that weren't specifically mentioned, like water, sewer, and broadband, I think would have to be careful. And those are the types of questions that invariably come up to the agencies and bodies that are monitoring the grant and are responsible for its implementation at the federal level. So that's where CCM comes in, and National League of Cities and COST, organizations which we belong to and participate in terms of getting some of these answers. Sometimes they're very liberal on interpretations. Other times they're really conservative, and sometimes a lot of it depends upon how much money there is in the pot and how it's being dispersed, and sometimes on your reputation of whether you've bent the curve in the past or whether you've been pretty straightforward. But this is a one-time unusual situation, so there may be more flexibility there than I'm thinking of.
Well, I would just ask you that when you do, obviously this is just the beginning of this, to find out how this money can be used and to come up with, for the administration to come back with a recommendation to the council of what to do with it. But I would just ask that when you start having those meetings, especially that comment about infrastructure, and it mentions specific utilities, I would like you to ask if it can be used for other types of utility infrastructure improvement. Because clearly, with the problems we've had in town for the last few years with electrical outages, that would seem to me to be, one that would make us more resilient, and the kind of thing they're trying to do. My other question on revenues, and this is more just a quick follow-up, because you mentioned the reserve for valuation, I guess, the 50 million this year, and we had the 75 million last year. I'd asked the question and got, thank you for sending out, and preliminary answer to that. One of the things I think we do need to start doing, especially when these reserve values are relatively high, is we do need to start tracking them and making some assumptions about how the reserves we establish, if we're going to establish reserves in 1 year, as we did with 75 million last year, we need to make some assumptions about what extra revenue we will potentially get from that. Because I think everyone would agree that setting up that $75 million reserve was not we think we'll get zero of it. I think it's a prudent thing to do. We don't know what it is, but over time, over the next several years, this year and the next couple of years, that 75 million, we will realize some of it. And, I think the 50 million this year would be roughly $2 million of additional income. So I realize, and thanks to the financial staff for getting some information on that. And I was not surprised that there's still some reserves outstanding from I think the 2016 or 17 year. But we do need to look at what the completion of that is, what the completion triangle. These are like incurred but not reported reserve type of things, which do come in over time. So I do think that's overall a source of revenue we need to start thinking about and planning into our projections. So I just going to make that comment at this point.
Yes, I think right now, excuse me, there are three major components out there that we're looking at. One of them was the MetLife building behind Cigna there, and that's in the $20 million range. We've got Doncaster again, and we've got Seabury, which I think combined are in the $30 to $35 million range. So those big three will make a significant dent in, depending upon how they come out. I mean, obviously, usually these are negotiated or they go to court, and you have appraisers coming in with different appraisals and dialogue back and forth on them. But those are the three major ones that we're kind of reserving against. There are relatively large number of appeals, but they're smaller values. But those are the big three at the moment.
Councillor Curtin and then Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor, and thanks for everyone coming in tonight. I just have a couple of comments and just a question. The first question is in regards to the revenue, Phil. Is there a way for us to project out based on, potential business, future businesses within the pipeline to say exactly what could we project, including what we're budgeting right here in regards to revenue, additional tax revenue?
Well, as I mentioned, don't forget your grand list is the determinant of what can be taxable for the subsequent year. So really, you're talking about the grand list is always filed by state law on January 31st. You can get an extension, but they don't like to see that. So in terms of additional tax revenue for the year that we're talking about, the fiscal 21-22 year, the grand list, at least in terms of potentials, growth or changes, other than the appeals that I've just mentioned. And the three big appeals I mentioned really come from the revaluation, so they're a year prior. But it's pretty well set. Where you pick up your taxes looking ahead is in the automobile market in terms of how many people are trading in or upgrading or moving to a higher price automobile. You do pick up some on supplemental taxes. These are items that are taxed in the middle of the year that you didn't have before. So you can we're really looking more at the subsequent year in terms of revenue coming in, and that revenue coming in the 22-23 year would be more, and that's why I was alluding to it with the building permit fees, would be tied to some of these projects that would be taxable. Now, very often on these projects, you don't wait until the end and then tax it. You tax it as it's going along. So you may have a subdivision that gets approval with lots. So the individual lots go up in price, even though there's not houses on there.
Correct.
And then the houses come along and you get a foundation permit, and that means that the taxes go up. And then you get framing and the project or the house or the building is completed. So you have a third increase, really, both in building permit fees and potentially in taxes, depending upon where it is within the year. We have several, as I mentioned, of these subdivisions and building projects that are in the permitting or pipeline stage. Some are ready for construction, and some of them are just ideas at the moment, and they're going through the permitting process in a conceptual manner. So it's hard to project that. I'm looking, and of course, the whole economy, we're in a really volatile economy over the past year, and it still hasn't 100% settled out going forward. So we need to monitor that very carefully in terms of how people are going to be spending money. Certainly, the $1.9 trillion influx of funds may encourage more building, home renovations, or other things that have been postponed for various reasons. So you can forecast, but it would be a pretty wide delta or difference between the lows and the highs as to what you'd get.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. I just want to make a comment in regards to the 2 million that we're estimating that we would get from the 1.9 trillion. I would be, and I think you were alluding to this, but I just want to hear your comment. I would be reluctant to, number one, budget for that in this current budget. As you clearly stated, it's difficult to know exactly over what time period we will be getting that 2 million, and plus what can we allocate it to. But an additional comment to that, I would foresee that at least a chunk of that funds going towards social needs within the community. If you think about the premise around the stimulus and talking about the purpose of it, I would be reluctant to allocate those funds to infrastructure per se. I think we have to capitalize on monies like that to bridge some of the void that we have within our community from a social aspect of things. So once again, my question pertaining to that, that's not a council per se decision making. That I would think that's a town manager sitting down and figuring out how to proceed with that. You can enlighten me with that in regards to how that money would be allocated once.
Well, I think we need further direction as to when we're going to receive it and how much we're going to receive, and then a finer interpretation of what it can be spent on. And once we get some of that information, we can obviously sit down with the council and various subcommittees, depending upon what we find out, and we can work out a plan as to how we want to apply it.
Okay, most likely you would present a plan to the finance committee, and we would go from there.
Right. Well, I would announce it, I obviously keep all of you informed as to how this is progressing on both the firmer definition of what we're getting, when we're getting it, and how we can use it. And then also, I think then we need to all sit down and say, okay, this is probably the most effective way of using this to meet the goals of the program and the residents in the community, which would need to be basically vetted by all of you and through the subcommittees. I think we just need to proceed ahead in that area. I think everybody will be fully involved. I'd urge caution, as you kind of intimated, Rickford, in terms of building too much optimism around it for different things until we find out exactly what we can use it for and what we can't use it for.
Thank you, Phil.
Ma'am, thank you. I wonder a couple of things. One is the money that you've budgeted to take out of our reserves because we have an excess over the 20%. And am I correct that the money that would be taken from reserves would just bring us down to 20%, which is a high limit of our reserve policy? Is that true?
That's if we use it, Joe. I mean, the reason we keep gaining on the amount of reserves that we have is that our revenues are higher than what we budgeted and our expenditures tend to be lower. So we ended up building up more of a unassigned fund balance, which is what it's called, or surplus, or just fund balance. The terminology really doesn't make that much difference, I guess, but we've been very prudent in expenditures and prudent in revenue estimating, and so it is gained. So if we used it all, if for instance our revenue estimates were off considerably, or we had expenditures beyond what we have budgeted, I would say that yes, you would use some of that 2.5 million. But if things have continued to track the way they've tracked, and they always don't do that, sometimes they change, but I would say that it'll be there again next year to use it, and we may even have 23% next year instead of 22.5%. So it may be an opportunity, and I think we've talked about this in prior subcommittee meetings, or maybe even at the council level. It may be an opportunity to use in the capital program at the end of the year or at the subsequent year when you've had your audit done, like we've had our audit done, and that's where it grew. You could go ahead and fund some backlog capital projects or do other things. I would recommend one-time expenditures, not building it into repetitive maintenance on the budget unless we absolutely had to, but that's what it's there for.
But in your budget, you have budgeted that 2.5% as income, have you not?
Yes, we did that in the current year as well.
Yeah.
We're holding that the same as the current year. We didn't increase it.
And there's no anticipation at this point of a surplus for this coming year, this current year at the end of that. But usually in the past, at one time, we used to spend a surplus. Well, we gave it to the Board of Ed at one point, but we used to spend it on OPEB and reducing our
correct.
OPEB.
Yeah.
Do we still have a program going on that? Is there any plan to do something to reduce our OPEB obligation?
Yes, the OPEB obligation is actuarially determined, and then we have a 10-year amortization program to get to the point where it should be 100% funded. But the problem is that the amount each year to be put into that based upon the actuarial determination is significant. It's around $8 million a year, and we're not anywhere near contributing that amount in. And I think, and I can be corrected by the finance staff, that the Board of Education did not meet their requirement in the past year, or maybe it's the current year, in terms of budgeting what they needed to put into that. We did do that in the past. You're absolutely correct. And that's another way of reducing the liability, is by obviously making a one-time contribution. I think I should also let you know that we've been very successful so far with at least our Public Works bargaining unit, where we've been able to eliminate retiree health insurance for any new hires there. And this will affect the actuarial determination going forward. Now, that's just something that's new. Nobody is, I think we've had one person left who's left since we signed the agreement, but it's almost a generational impact. But the actuaries do figure that in, because it starts to limit the people that would be eligible for retiree health benefits. OPEB, OPEB, stands for Other Post-Employment Benefits. There's a Governmental Accounting Standards Board, this is getting a little arcane, I understand, pronouncement as to how it's to be determined and funded and so forth. But we are making, the town side anyway, is making its what we call the ARC. I mentioned this the other night, the annual required contribution. And so we're making our part of the bargain, and the Board of Ed has been, up until I think just recently, this past year, making their payments in as well. So we're eventually going to get there. That's one of the first questions that the rating agencies ask when you're going for a bond review. And so that it came up in January when we sold the 9.7 million of Public Works facility bonds. And if we pass a library referendum in November and we're back out in the bond market, that'll be one of the first questions the rating agencies will be asking again. So that's always an option.
If I might just clarify Councilor Merritt's question, I think what the town did in the past with regard to OPEB was in the fourth quarter, you were asked by previous finance directors if there was any unencumbered balances at the end of the year, if you could transfer those amounts into OPEB. So it wasn't the excess revenues, it was unspent expenditures. And that's what was done for several years, and they were transferred into OPEB. Last year, I believe you used a lot of the unspent balances to transfer into the capital improvement fund to fund several projects because the funds were not going to be available in the current year.
I'm concerned, Phil, that you said that we weren't doing what we should be doing per year, that it was something like 10 million a year. I thought we were. That I'm confused. You said we are meeting our arc generally, but and the board has up until now. Is that, are we on track or not? I don't understand.
Nancy, do you want to comment on that?
You know what, can I just ask if maybe, since that's not a revenue item, if we could postpone that conversation?
Sure. Yeah.
Until we get into the fixed cost part of the budget, and then we can go into it in a little bit more detail and have some of the information prepared for you about the ARC and the phase-in plans for both the town, the police, and the Board of Ed. You're muted, Joe.
I guess. Okay. You made a comment that there was a 6% increase in tax revenue, and I gather that is partially a tax increase and partially other revenues that are indirectly affected by that. Is that true? Does that include a 3+% increase in property tax?
It does include the property tax increase that would be needed to fund the proposed budget, but it also includes other items that are categorized into that heading, such as the back taxes that are due the town and that sort of thing.
Okay, thank you.
We did take a look at several years of history for those other categories, the prior year collections, interest and liens, as well as the supplemental motor vehicle, and we adjusted those upward accordingly. Those categories went up much higher at a much bigger percentage than the annual levy. And I suspect that this could be part of the reason why we've had such luck in having fund balances in the prior years, because we weren't budgeting high enough for some of those.
Okay, thank you, Phil. I don't see any other hands, so you can continue, please.
Okay, well, let's go on to the capital improvement program, and we have a number of different projects in here, and I have the department head standing by to give you a brief overview, and of course you can ask questions as we go ahead. So we'll go on to page 2, and this gives you an overview of where the money is coming from for these particular projects. And you can see the project on the left-hand side, and you can see the funding source in the table that proceeds over to the right-hand side. And we're talking a total of about $2,512,000 here with the capital budget, but the absolute largest expenditure is for road improvements. We've got $1,457,000, and that comes from the capital grant that we get from the state. So that again, we're using the governor's estimates. So why don't we go through the projects? We'll go to the next page. The replacement of the 2009 E250 cargo van by the Board of Education. This is the only item that I've included from the Board of Education list in the capital budget this year. I did have the Public Works Department TI, or technical inspection of the van, and they are recommending that it be replaced. So that's that particular item. Okay, engineering, we got a number of different items in here covering a variety of different activities. We've got the Philly Park improvements. This continues to be a ongoing phased project. Jonathan Thesey is here. He'll be going through these. I'm going to turn this over to him in a minute. and he can talk about the Philly Park, the MS4 stormwater improvements, the traffic calming program, and greenway planning. So Jonathan, you want to go ahead and go into a little more detail on these?
Sure, Phil. Thank you. And council members. So starting with Philly Park, the $100,000 that is proposed there.
Jonathan, can you hold a minute? Councilor Curtin, your hand went up, sir.
I'm just putting it up for when he's finished to get to, yeah, thank you.
Jeez, please don't scare me. I'm sorry. Phil, just a question. Are we going to get these slides as well?
Yes, I can
Okay.
send them out tonight to you. I've got them on the computer, so.
That'd be great. Okay, go ahead. I'm sorry.
Madam Mayor, I have a quick question before Jonathan starts. I know the numbers that we're seeing. Is it possible for us to see exactly what the total cost would be to complete some of these projects that we're going through? I think that's something that we have mentioned in the past. I think it will help us get a better sense of the completion.
Right, the
timeline.
Philly Park, I think Jonathan Thesey has an outline. I think it's about 1.5 million to complete the Philly
1.5.
Park project.
Actually, it's 1.8 right now.
1.8.
Okay,
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Curtin, also, if you go to the CIP section in the budget book in the back part of the section, there's the entire 5-year plan. So that would show you how much for some of these projects that are multi-year projects and what the cost of it would be over the 5 years.
Yeah, I saw some of it.
Yep.
The Philly one is the one I was interested in. Thank you.
Okay. So for Philly for the upcoming year, what I put in for the $100,000 to cover is, first of all, to do a rehabilitation of the pavement on the existing parking lot. Again, it's in, it's getting in pretty rough shape, and it's around the catch basin is settled. So to bring that up and just to bring it, to get it to a more usable parking lot. Also to get a accessible path, which would be similar to the stone paths that we're putting on the island, from the parking lot to the bridge, the pedestrian bridge on the back side. As we won't have a parking lot on the other side yet, we do need an accessible path, and there won't be one from the north side. So that's to get that in, and then also to basically do the trail work on the west side, both just to get that done, but also because we did have a number of donations that were associated with trails. And so as we get the other donation work that had been done on the island done, I think it behooves us to get the trail work done as well, so that those donations are seeing, that the fruits of their donations being implemented in the park. So those are the items that $100,000 is looking to cover. The MS4 improvements, that's just an ongoing program to be compliant with the state requirements, the general permit requirements from DEP regarding stormwater improvements. The traffic calming program, again, that we just put that underway at the beginning of the year, as you all know, but as of yet, there's been no funding put in place for that. The 25,000 that's there would be put towards temporary measures that could be put in place to, as locations come up, to try and determine if permanent, the effectiveness of the measures before permanent installations are put in place. So this would be purchasing hard rubber speed humps, as well as some specialized barrels and some other things that might be used for temporary installations for those tests. And the greenway planning, that is, we have found out within the last 2 years, I guess it was, that the Office of Rail at the DOT has now taken a position that they do not want, unless they've got a significant number of or amount of right-of-way, which we don't have through Bloomfield, they do not want these trails in their railroad right of way. So that kind of changes from Day Hill Road down to the town center, what our previous planned route was. I've done some preliminary work looking at some other options. There's also some, questions still working with Hartford on how we would get into how the Greenway route would go into the center of Hartford. So this is just some planning on our end to look at some different alternatives to come up with now again, a revised route for the Greenway through town.
Okay, thank you, Jonathan. I guess we'll go on to the next page, Nancy.
Did we want to go through these, all of them, and then have questions, or did we want to?
Maybe we can do questions on this
yeah,
page while
let's do-
Jonathan's here.
Yeah, let's do questions on each so that we don't forget and that we can circle back. So can you take down so I can see? I have a question. In my book, the traffic calming is 50,000, not 25.
I can answer that. And the book had 50,000 for that, and it did not include the Greenway planning. So we took 25 from the traffic calming and applied it to the Greenway. It was an error. The dollar amount was the same in total for all the projects, but
it broke out. So 25 for traffic and 25 for Greenway.
Correct.
Okay. Are there any other questions? Okay, let's move on.
All right.
Okay, under finance, which is page 5, we've got the revaluation, the property revaluation. I believe, and you may all have a better background on this than I do, but I think there was concern about the spike every 5 years in the revaluation of property in town that's required by the state. And you've decided to go ahead and budget a fourth or a fifth of it every year. I may have some additional information from Nancy or somebody else if they want to add it.
No, that's basically it. Both this and the plan of conservation and the development, rather than taking a big hunk when those plans are due, as in previous years with the reval. I think last time we did two rather large chunks. So the direction I believe we were given back then was to see if we could soften the blow every year. So we're starting to pre-fund it. And this is for the 2022 property reval.
2024.
Sorry, thank you, Todd. Todd's here to answer any questions if anybody has any.
And that is the difference. But when I first arrived here in the first reevaluation for 2019, it was only budgeted in 2 years, the 2 years prior to the reevaluation. So there was a huge amount for those 2 years. The other places I've worked, and it just makes more sense in my mind anyways, is to budget over the 5-year period. That way you have a steady amount every year, and you're not trying to collect something large in the last 2 years.
Can you take down the slide so I can see if anyone has any questions? Seeing none, we can continue.
Okay, our next slide is essentially public works, and we've got 3 different items up for public.
Oh, sorry, I'm sorry.
Oh, okay.
No, it is Public Works. I just messed up on the screen sharing. Okay. There we go.
Okay, we have 3 items here, and I'll let Dan Carter, our Public Works Director, go into the details on these. Dan?
Good evening, everyone. Thanks, Phil. The first item on the that's been put forth by the town manager in this capital improvement program is for fleet heavy equipment. Just note that in addition, this is not only just public works vehicles. Any vehicles for us, public works or general town vehicles, are part of this heavy equipment fleet replacement. So that amount is $250,000 funded through the general fund. Our proposal is approximately 200,000 of that would be for a 6-wheel plow truck. Currently, we have 15 in our fleet. We like to replace one per year, which would give us a 15-year life cycle. It's a little bit longer than what we would like, but we feel that we can maintain our vehicles. The vehicle that would be replaced would be a 1996 Ford L8000 plow truck, which is in poor condition. The other $50,000 is our second item on priorities for capital fleet purchases is to purchase what they call a hot box. It is a towable trailer that is heated. It's used to facilitate pothole patching in the winter and to keep the asphalt hot while you move from location to location. And that would supplement a pavement recycler that we purchased for this fiscal year. It really helps us in our pothole patching program. The second item, which is sidewalk replacement, funded to the tune of $50,000. That source of monies is the capital grant money. That $50,000 would be earmarked for sidewalk maintenance along public and state roads in town. Currently, we have over 20 miles of sidewalk. Historically, we have not had a dedicated fund to maintain them. They are an important asset to the town. And if you go around, I'm sure you've seen many locations that have damaged or sidewalks have deteriorated or lifted, damaged by tree roots. So that would be used to chip away at our maintaining our sidewalk inventory. And then the third item, funded to the tune of $1.457 million, is the capital road programs. That source of funding is the LOSIP grant and capital grant money. And the capital roadway improvements consist of basically 5 categories: crack sealing of roads, micro paving of roads, overlaying, milling and paving, and then full depth reclamation, which is a much more expensive repair method. We're finalizing the roadway list now, and that summarizes our capital program, and certainly available for any questions.
So I see the deputy mayor, but once again, I'm looking at roadway improvements in the book, and it's 1507056.
I can answer that question. When we made the change with the Greenway, we had to add it because the Greenway was not eligible under the program that we were reducing. It couldn't be paid for the same. We had to make a couple of shifts in what the funding sources were. So the total amount is the same. It's just where it's coming from.
Okay. I'm going to have the deputy mayor go, then Councillor Calhoun, then Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Mayor. I had the same question you did. I also want to make a comment, though. The sidewalk repair program that was underway started last year. I thought it was very successful. I was a little concerned about it to begin with, but it turned out very well. I was very surprised. So I'm sure we're saving money not having to replace it. And it's probably a small portion of replacement of what has to be done. So I think it's a good program. I think it worked. I'm giving my support for it. Thank you.
So before Councillor Calhoun goes, I'm a little concerned, right? Because if the public is looking at the book, because we've made it available online, and we're asking them to ask questions via email. If they're looking at the book, like I'm looking at the book, and I'm having some difficulty, how are they going to know?
We can post the update online, and actually this presentation, the summary page in the presentation actually puts a chart on that, and I can post that on the website for
Okay.
people to access.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Councillor Calhoun and then Councillor Merritt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I was looking at a couple, there's two separate line items for urban forestry. Dan, can you please, I don't know if it would be you or Jonathan, can you go into a little bit more detail about why it's two separate line items and the cost out is what it is?
So the urban forestry program was a capital project that the town manager did not move forward in this year's budget. So it was something that we were interested in pursuing. It's just that, and maybe Phil can comment on that. It wasn't something that was is part of the Public Works capital project in the town manager's budget.
I think, Stephanie, essentially what it is we've tried over the years to come up with a plan, if you will, for the center of town, Blue Hill, basically the 3 TIF districts of a planting program of shade trees and other things, and it was labeled urban forestry. It originally started out in the center of town, around the town hall, the town green, library, and within that TIF district in the center of town. And it was designed to, one, take an inventory of all of the trees that we have, which you can do through the aerial mapping program. You can usually come up with the diameter of those trees, their location, obviously, and then you can go ahead to start to put in a program. And the program would be 1 on removal, 2 replanting, 3 trimming and feeding of existing trees, and obviously in some cases planting new ones in different spots. So that was the gist of it. And we also had a forest management plan that was designed to look at the town's forests or open spaces and go in and look at those from the standpoint of doing some cutting and using the timber proceeds to come up with a program of trails and trail management and replanting and so forth in some of the town's forest land or open space properties where we had substantial woodland and whatnot.
Okay, thank you.
Councilor Merritt.
Thank you. I was concerned about how much money we've been spending or not spending on the roads. Years ago, it was said that we had to spend more than $1 million a year just to keep up. And I don't think we spent that last year. And I'm wondering if we're spending enough this year so that we're going to get on top of it, which I think I see as a problem that's getting worse, not better. And I wonder how you feel about what we should be budgeting every year, Dan, for maintenance of roads.
So our target number through our asset management consultant is 1.5 million. So we're right in the neighborhood. Last year we did spend the $1 million. It was an unusual year because of COVID. At the beginning of the season, a lot of the subcontractors basically stopped working. And then as we got into the season, we were able to schedule some. So it was a little bit of a reduced output last year. But we do have a fairly detailed asset management program. And right now our consultant is telling us 1.5 million is our target number to maintain our roads with a slightly improving overall grade.
Thank you.
Councilor DiLorenzo.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Good evening. I just had a quick question, Dan, regarding the 2021 Public Works projects. There seem to be a lot more of them in our book. So was it just decided that the ones you reviewed with us are the top ones and that's all you're going to be doing in this fiscal year? Or what about all of the other ones?
So we submit our capital projects to the manager, and then he, with the capital project committee, they make the determination of what they feel that they can safely fund. And that is what they put forth for the capital program for the fiscal year. So
Okay,
even though we have a lot of projects that we ask for, we
Right.
also realize that everything we ask for isn't everything we get.
right, understood. So would the money in those columns then be, extended out next fiscal years?
Ideally, you would populate that capital program for 5 years. And what we'll do is we'll make our reassessment next fiscal year and make our adjustments and have to space out projects and push them out.
I think
Okay.
it's important to realize too, Patrick, that in the guidance given to the departments in the fall, when they start putting the capital improvement program together, they are required to list the projects in priority order as to what they feel is the highest priority. So the listing and the projects that you see this evening are the ones that are the highest priorities, basically submitted by the department head with some modifications by myself and the staff after discussions with the department heads. So.
Okay, so like the Public Works Fuel Island canopy, that's listed for 100,000, so that would be an example of something that's not really a priority for this year.
Well, I think if you talk to somebody who's filling up their vehicle during a rain, it would be priority.
Yes.
But we're not quite finished with that project yet. And I know Nancy will come after me now. There could be some money left in there that we might be able to put towards it. And you may see it this time next year, or if things turn out well, we may go ahead and be able to take care of it out of the project that's underway. So
I hate to disagree with my boss in public, but I think it's that happening of there being any money left over in that project or slim to none.
Gotcha.
Not over till it's over.
This is true.
I love the optimism.
Thank you.
Councillor Wong.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Please note, I have been logged on the call since 6:59, so I just wanted India to capture that. Thank you, Dan. I had a quick question, and what is the correlation of DPW capacity in relation to the asset management recommendation? So they're saying these are the roads, these are the priorities that we need to address, but do we have the capacity to address that within this fiscal budget season or year, excuse me?
It is in our capacity to handle what we have, but we do, construction is a very unpredictable animal. So, there are always things that we deal with: weather, delays, scheduling of contractors. So, do we get every road every year? No, but the amount of money that we have currently been funded for, we've been able to, get a majority of the work done every season.
So is there overflow work that that we're incorporating into this season as well?
Yeah, we still have fiscal year 21. We're going to be getting off into the spring. The monies that we're talking here are fiscal year 22. Mm-hmm. One of the things that's impacting the road capital improvement work and its schedule is, we're coming upon roads that have already been constructed originally, paved once, and now we're looking at resurfacing them a second time. And they all have road drainage that now is approaching 60 to 80 years old. And we're finding that infrastructure, the storm drainage infrastructure, is in need of some upgrading, some repairs. So we've been trying to accomplish as much of that work with our town forces as we can. But it is something that we're finding we're having to pay more attention to. We're having to do more inspections early on to determine how much drainage construction work will be required and how it's going to impact us being able to get the road resurfaced. The last thing we want to do is go in and spend money paving a road to find out a year later we've got to dig up a portion of it to make a storm drainage repair. So that's just a little example of some of the things that kind of impact our schedule as we move forward.
Okay, thanks, Dan. And one more question, and I'm not sure if it was answered. Maybe I'm asking it a different way. So in regards to the recommendation coming from the asset management group, are you telling them, or is the town manager and yourself telling them, say, hey, can you get us a conservative recommendation based off where we are from an economy standpoint? And that's how we got the recommendations today. Can we be more aggressive? Are there more roads that we can fit into this? And are we not asking for additional funds to address the road conditions or include some more priorities in that ask?
So that's kind of a complicated question, and it may sound like a complicated answer. I think it might be a subject for a future meeting. I'd love to have our consultant come in and explain to you how the asset management program runs, how we develop our rankings. So there's a road list for every road in town, from the absolute worst right up to the very best. So every road in town is on a list. And basically we indicate them, we give the consultant an idea of what we anticipate our budget being. And then they provide us with kind of a holistic approach, the 5 different types of capital road improvements that we do that would maintain our overall average road rating at the highest level.
Okay, thank you. I think that would be helpful, Mr. Town Manager. In the future, maybe we can kind of get that on one of our.
We'd be happy to have them come in.
Wonderful. Okay, thank you, Madam Mayor.
Okay, seeing no more questions, let's keep on going.
IT.
Okay, we're now dealing with information technology, and Scott is the person that will be going through these recommended improvements. Scott?
Thank you very much. So the first item here is actually the video backup storage for the intended body worn camera update. I think the chief will be presenting on the body worn camera project later on, so I won't go too far into that. But our existing backup storage for our body cameras is coming up to as end of life. So it's time for us to start planning for expanded upgrade for it. We currently store over 16 terabytes of body worn camera data and in-car camera data. And obviously to back that up is a considerable task. So this is the cost associated with the backup of that, to ensure that if something happens to that video management server, whether it's just a regular failure or some sort of incident, that we have that data backed up. The second item is the main distribution switch at Town Hall now is over 10 years old. It was put in originally during a telecom upgrade. It also is end of service, end of life. It's still functioning, but it's with the recent upgrades we did with our virtualization, it's time to replace that switch. We have it, it's fully, all the modules are populated, and so we're actually running out of data ports for Town Hall anyways. So it's those are the 2 main priority items that are in this CIP.
I see. Councillor Calhoun, Deputy Mayor, and then Councillor Curtin.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. Scott, is there a possibility for cloud backup for those body cameras?
Yes, there is. That being said, there's lots of issues that we've looked into storing sensitive police data in the cloud. It's
Breach,
actually,
I suspect, huh? Yeah.
and it's very expensive. We've actually looked at a myriad of different solutions. One of the things we like about our current solution that's being proposed is that it offers an in-house solution. The cloud-based solutions are really expensive, mainly because you are storing that data in the cloud. Also, since we're talking about 16 terabytes of data, that's no small amount.
You're right.
We tend to have about 100 gigabytes of data a day, and to upload that through our internet connection it's not something we can't handle, but it's a lot, and it's, you know, the feeling is that we may have more issues. Right now, we handle that all within the police department. It's all in our secured environment. We follow a very strict guidelines through the criminal justice information system. We have all of the access control in place where people are logging in, using props to go into certain doors. There's a lot of controls in place already. And since we've already invested that, to me, it seems, you know, spending, you know, $20,000 for a 5-year, 6-year investment makes more sense than spending a lot more money putting that out in a cloud infrastructure.
So this is for each officer.
Each officer, this is for the whole kit and caboodle. So everything on the server, right now we even back up the server itself. So we can, if the server blows up, we could grab another piece of hardware and then restore it on it. So, you know, but again, that storage is now reaching its end of life. One of the requirements to stay CJIS compliant is to have hardware that's fully supported. So that's another part of this. And that's why it's in front of you right now.
Okay, thank you.
All right, I think I was next, I'm not sure. Quick question for you. You came before us a while back, Scott, under an urgent concern for the ability to download the information on these cameras and maintain the file, so to speak. The question I have is, have we resolved that manpower requirement in order to maintain these systems, or is that still something that's we have to deal with?
I think that's actually a combo job between the chief and me. I would say on the IT side, we've had a significant increase in support requests associated with the body cameras. It's obviously 3 or 4 years ago, it was something new that we weren't doing. We didn't increase staff at all, but I can tell you that we've had a large increase in requests. Each one of those body cameras has a battery. The batteries have a service life. We've had to replace just about, I think probably every one at this point, at least once. And that obviously takes time. So there's been a lot of things like that. Even the docks, you know, you're putting these cameras in and out, in and out, in and out every day. The docks wear out, we've had to replace them. So there's a ton of just regular maintenance items that are associated with that. So we've added, and we haven't added staff, but it's an increased burden and workload on our side. I don't know if the chief wants to speak to anything. Again, we're getting into, I think we could be.
Yeah, I know it crosses the line, but I just want to know if you have it covered so that we don't have a problem.
I think we have it under control.
Okay. Okay.
We have staff under control to manage the system, yes.
Councilor Curtin.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Scott, I have a couple of questions. I was expecting to see a little bit more in the budget in regards to making sure that we have the systems in place to go back into a very, in my opinion, unstable environment from the standpoint in how we get communications out to the public with the various platforms that we're currently using. So if we went back out and want to still maintain that level of accessibility in regards to being able to stream on YouTube and you know, log into live meetings, what would that look like? I know that I did have some conversation with the town manager about this and was trying to get a meeting to get a sense from you of what that cost would be, an estimate. What would it look if we had to, have those capabilities to go back into the council chambers and still maintain this level of meeting availability on YouTube and so on.
I think, so first of all, right now, YouTube and the streaming is free. So there's no additional cost for that. Zoom is something that we're handling within the budget. One of the things that we're looking at, again, Dave Lesko in India, I think he's on this call somewhere, maybe she's out there. We've been tasked with coming up with some recommendations for you. And so, I wouldn't want to sort of jump that process. But what I can tell you is I don't think that it's going to rise to the level of needing a capital project or improvement, unless the project is larger in scope than what I've foreseen or what we've already talked about. There's still some questions about which facility. Sorry, there's some questions about which facility. There's obviously differences between the human services and the council chambers and even CR5. We've talked about even some hybrid approaches. And obviously I think that's amenable to you all, but I think there's still a lot to be worked out about what exactly I'm looking to do.
So here, I'm going to ask the question a little differently. So if we were to go back into the council chambers sometime next week, how would we be able to stream these meeting lives in either a committee meeting or a council meeting? Because we didn't have that capability before. Obviously, we're on the Zoom platform, and that's different than being in the chambers.
Well, I'll tell you how I foresee it. I can't, like I said, again, we're trying to meet as a group, and Dave's been very much involved in sort of the video production. So I don't want to give you something that's not fully baked. But what I will say is there's something called a Zoom room. And what it is it's a camera that is connected to a computer, and there's a controller, and it allows you to join the meeting like this just like this. So you would have a hybrid where people could join in to this meeting this way, and people could be in person as well, like in a meeting room or a conference room. People could be in the crowd as well. And some degree, and this is where you can have separate microphones. You can integrate in with the microphones. You could use the monitors that are existing on the wall. You could use the speakers that are existing, or you can have a separate system. These are where the costs differ, but that's one solution we're looking at. If council is looking for a hybrid approach, a Zoom room with a specialized high definition, wide aperture camera that's able to take the whole picture in. Some of these cameras are more sophisticated, even though they can tell when someone's speaking over there, they're able to focus in on one section. That's what I'm mainly coming up with for the group. And again, these systems are already commercially available. Zoom Rooms has been out there for a while. It's obviously picked up a lot of steam. There's big companies that have been partnering with Zoom to come up with these systems. So it's not something that we have to reinvent the wheel with.
If I could add in here, Rickford, I have asked Scott, Dave, India, Sharon and whatnot to get together and come up with a plan that Scott has been alluding to take care of exactly what you're talking about. I think we're all concerned, and I've mentioned this in the past, I think that on April 20th or 21st, the executive orders that the governor has the authority and how we're conducting our meetings today may expire. The legislature may decide not to renew some of these executive orders that relate to public meetings. And all of a sudden, we're going to be put into the position of essentially deciding whether we want to continue on our own with the current method of operation or whether we want to revert back to some form of in-person type of meetings and process. So we're coming up with a plan. I think you've gotten a little bit of a preview through Scott as to what they're talking about, but hopefully we'll have that for the next admin education subcommittee meeting or And if there's enough of a finance component to it, we may have to go to the finance subcommittee too, and then to the council so we can implement it.
Okay, I think we lost Councilor Curtin. So if there's no other questions, let's keep it moving.
Thank you very much. My project for this year's capital budget is to replace the current wading pool with a water splash pad. The requested dollar amount is $150,000. That would be on top of $250,000 that was already allocated towards this project. We went out to bid. We worked with Weston and Sampson to develop the plans for this project and went out to bid back in September of 2019. And after going through the bidding process, we've realized that the project was a little underfunded at this point. So that's why we're coming back here to ask for $150,000 to complete this project. The current wading pool is approximately 50 years in age. We are working on a Band-Aid repair at the present time. Back at the end of 2019 season, because we didn't open during the 2020 season, there was a major malfunction within the pool that we were quoted from a pool contractor to replace in the dollar amount of $12,000. We were able to secure through our current plumber, Dab Caruso from Caruso's Plumbing, a Band-Aid repair in the amount of $2,500. It is a Band-Aid repair. It is currently working. We don't know how long it'll work for. So we do have our fingers crossed going into the 2021 season. So the completion of this wading pool is important in order to keep that play apparatus, that water feature available to our residents. I also like to highlight that we average over the past 3 seasons that we were open, summer of 2017, 18, and 19, we averaged just over 16,000 users of the pool facility. So there is quite a bit of usage during our 10 weeks program. So we feel as if this is an important project. It is become the trend within the Parks and Recreation field, and the municipalities, surrounding municipalities have started to construct these, and we feel as if it would be appropriate for Bloomfield to have one as well. The nice thing about these is the current wading pool is it's a pool that goes anywhere from 1 foot to 2 feet of water. This one here has spray features within within the splash pad itself. There are 17 spray apparatuses for enjoyment. So this will serve numerous children and youth for this. So I'll be happy to answer any questions.
I don't see any hands. So let's keep on going.
Hey, good evening, everyone. And what we have is, as you may know, every 10 years we're required under state statute to update our plan of conservation and development. The last one was done back in 2012. So it's time to do it again. I went out last time. Nancy was helpful in getting me these figures. We spent over about $220,000 in updating the plan of conservation and development. And I think at the time also included an update to the town zoning regulations as a result of that. So what I'm asking for, I went around and asked, got some figures from people as to how much they're spending nowadays on plan of conservation. I believe we can get done with about $65,000 split over 2 fiscal years. The majority of it spent this fiscal year. And the reason I think we can get for a lot less is because we spent a good deal of time and money coming up with a tax increment financing study and plan that looked at the economic development aspects that the town was most interested in. And we also did a complete street study that looked at a lot of the transportation issues. So I think those two sections of the plan of conservation development, we can utilize those studies for that. I've also got a $12,000 grant from the Department of Housing to study do an affordable housing assessment, which will inform our housing portion of the plan of conservation development. So I think we'd be in good shape with the amount of money that I've proposed. I'd be happy to take any questions at this time.
I see one hand, Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. And I apologize because I had my hand up just after the last discussion. It gets back to the question on the list here of projects under the Leisure Services Department. There's more than just the splash pad. And I'm just wondering, is there a revision required to this chart, to this table, I'm sorry. You had several projects that had been identified, including, let's see, where was it? The high school athletic field replacement. You had something in there for Wittenberry Hills Golf Course. Now, I'm not questioning these projects. I'm sure they're appropriate. My question is, are they in the first year's budget or not? Since they're in here, unlisted here, but are they there or are they not there? There seems to be some question about that as to what the manager's recommending. Because we didn't talk about there are four other items in here that we didn't discuss.
I think, David, that, this is the top priority according to David in terms of the leisure services activities that are going on. Certainly the other projects at the council feels that they should be at a higher priority or they should replace other projects that are in the manager's recommended budget. That's the council's prerogative, obviously, to change those around. I think you'll find that just about every project in there has a supporter or is worthwhile pursuing. It's a matter of trying to fit it into the budget and being prudent. And at the same time, I felt with the splash pad that we already have $250,000 that's been sitting there for 2 years. And let's get the project completed, otherwise let's not do the project and we got to come up with some other approach. So I was the one that pushed this. It was David's top priority too, but I pushed it forward to get it completed.
No, I have no issue with that. I just
I
don't know how to deal with the other numbers.
Deputy Mayor, I think that this issue was also raised by Councilor Goff in an email last week, and I have made a revision to the 5-year plan where I added a column. In previous years, I think there was a column that showed town manager recommended. And if you'd like, I can send that out to you. Maybe because it's not just leisure services where that was. There was obviously more than the town could afford for this year. So
that would be okay. That would be helpful because it's confusing.
Sure. We can send it out to you.
Yeah, I think that would be good. But one of the things that the council has asked the town manager to do is to present us his budget. And I think that's what the town manager is doing. I think based on what he said was he received information from the department heads. Some CIP committee sat down and they came up with priorities. And that's what he's presenting here. I do believe that, anyone can advocate for most of these projects here. I just don't think we have that money to be able to do everything. So once we go through the town manager's budget, then the council can sit down and say, you know what, we probably don't want to spend $150,000 on this splash pad. We probably want to spend $71,500 on the athletic field. And then we figure it out after that. But we asked the town manager to present a budget. That's what they're doing tonight. And they already explained that they sat down, they came up with priorities, and that's what we're being presented. We have the opportunity, once they're finished, to go back and work it out however we believe that we should work it out. But I also want us to be very mindful. We do not have a blank check here in the town of Bloomfield. So let's be mindful of that. I'm going to let Councilor DiLorenzo go and then Councilor Merritt.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So I just had a quick question and just for reference, that was where my question was coming from too, because looking at the chart in the book doesn't match to what the slide said. So I think that's where part of the confusion is. I understand the logic and the explanation behind it, and I appreciate that. But when you're looking at the book in its current state, all those projects fall under the current or the next fiscal year. So I think that's where the confusion's coming in. Okay, so back to Jose. Thank you, Jose. My question for you is, and I'm sorry if I missed it, but in that 45K, does that include the resources for preparing and doing the plan, or is that expected to be done by the town staff? Who is doing that plan?
That would include getting a consultant. I anticipate, this year, again, since we've already done a lot of some of the elements by doing the complete streets and the TIF, and then even the town center plan to the extent that it's still valid. The 45 is going to include, gathering some new, demographics. Hopefully we'll have some census figures by then. We still don't. Sources of information that we need to sort of look at before we can really sort of form the base of the plan. I anticipate this particular year, 10 years has been quite a bit in terms of technology and progress in terms of getting public participation and getting people actually to weigh in, so it becomes a plan that people in the whole community can support. I think in the past, it's been steering committee and in-person meetings with focus groups and maybe small numbers of people who could show up to a meeting, and that might not always come out with the best result. I think there's the technology, there's a lot of new programs and a lot of new consultants out there that can have very good hybrid methods of getting opinions and getting people involved in the process, which I think is important when you do a plan of conservation development. So hopefully we'll use some, when we put out our RFP, we'll certainly make it very clear that we want a lot of public participation, whether it be online, Zoom, in person, going to community meetings. I know with Complete Streets, we went out to celebrate Bloomfield and dragged people into our booth, and it actually worked out pretty well, I thought. So you got to use a variety of methods. So
what is just a high level estimate of the timeline for completing that plan once it starts, once the RFP goes out and it starts?
Well, I hope to get if you approve this, I hope to get start on July 1st running with a consultant. I believe that the 10-year technically would be up in, and I don't know if it's August or October of 2022. So there'll be some production and finishing up to do in the next fiscal year. So that's our goal. Our goal is to be on time with the updates, so we don't go beyond the 10 years.
Okay, it just didn't seem to me that was enough money to hire a consultant and do all the things you've been talking about. But I guess if you've already reviewed that and feel it's appropriate, then
I've talked to some people that have been doing these plans, some consultants, and they thought, it's a good time it's a buyer's market at this point.
Okay. No, thank you.
Thank you, Jose. Am I unmuted? I guess I am. My concern with the plan of development is that it ends up on the shelf and nobody reads it. And I think the council should be more involved in it because it lines up to some degree with our capital budget. We're the people that decide where the money goes. So, and most of the things on the plan involve money. And I especially, this is only every 5 years, I guess. And I looked at the last one, and I said, well, and I think there was some effort to have an action plan to put things on agendas of the appropriate committee and try to make it happen, but it didn't. It never panned out. There are some really great ideas of those plan of developments. But if nobody reads them, nothing happens, especially if the council doesn't. And when I went through what the recommendations were, 4 years ago, maybe it was 10 years ago, I'm not sure. most of them involve the town council and coming up with in the capital budget, because if you want to do anything, you have to go through the council. And I think the problem is follow through. So there's some, I think I recommend the plan of development is good reading for everybody on the council. It ought to be required reading, and to look at it and say, well, why didn't we do this? Why didn't somebody bring this up? And it's like any planning effort. If you don't follow through, it's a shame. I think they do a great job. So it's a shame we don't. Some we do, but mostly we don't. So I would hope that there's some, not just effort invested in coming up with a plan, but some effort invested in follow through. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Goff.
Yes, thank you, Madam Mayor. I certainly want to echo what Councilor Merritt just said. I do think that one of the important things with the plan of conservation development, or any plan, even this capital plan, is that we, this goes back to our strategic planning and long-term planning from the recent retreat. It's all well and good to not fund something and push it to the next year, but when that happens for 6 or 7 years running, you have to ask the question, are we ever really going to fund this? Shouldn't this really be things we do plan to do? And if it's in the next year, then it becomes a high priority for next year. That's an aside. I just want to make a comment about the plan of conservation development. And I certainly think that we should, I agree completely with Planner Geiner that we need to be looking at a firm that comes in and with all of the new ways of, with Zoom and all of the virtual ways of connecting, it's going to be important that they try to utilize some of those, just like we're talking about in future council meetings, to get participation. I don't know how much he is in contact with the former planner, Tom Hooper. I haven't seen Tom now for probably 5 or 6 years, but since a land trust event he came to. But I know, because I attended a lot of the plan of conservation development meetings when it was happening before, he and his staff at the time took extraordinary efforts to get people to participate. And there was good participation in some of those meetings. But as you pointed out, it's very selective of who attends, who thinks it's important. So, whatever you can do, I would hope you would try to make sure you get any lessons learned, although that was 10 years ago, but trying to integrate some of these new methods of making it easier for people to participate. I think that's great, and I think it gives us a more reflective document of what the vision of the community really is. Thanks.
Thank you. No more hands. Can you guys continue, please?
Chief?
I guess that's my call, right? So the Bloomfield Police Department is the first police department in Connecticut to implement a full body-worn camera program through the entire agency. It was a highly progressive program at the time. It's been adopted by several agencies throughout Connecticut. It's now mandated as part of the General Assembly's police accountability legislation passed last year, which is going to mandate body-worn cameras for all police officers throughout Connecticut. We originally purchased our mobile video and body-worn camera system in 2016. We had it fully implemented in December of that year. The system is now a little over 4 years old. By the time this is approved, we get the equipment, and this is just for the body-worn cameras. That system will be 5 years old at the time of budget implementation. The equipment, as Scott alluded to earlier, briefly, is deteriorating. The batteries have been, the whole units have been replaced several times, but the age of those units is affecting battery life, connectivity to the ports and the system, and the reliability of the system itself. We are requesting replacement of this, of our entire video platform in 2 phases. The first is this year, 21-22, for the replacement of the existing body worn camera equipment that is worn by the officers, the docking stations and connectivity equipment at the department from the amount of $112,000. And then the following year will be an additional $105,000 that we'll be requesting for the mobile video platform, server, and connectivity issues from the cruiser. And I can answer any questions you have at this time.
Thank you, Chief. Thank you for helping Bloomfield to be a leader on the body camera, which I'm grateful for. Question for you: what is the shelf life of a body camera?
Yeah, so we asked in multiple areas. I asked the vendors, which, when you ask a vendor, you usually get the vendor's opinion because they want to sell you equipment. But they told me that the technology lifespan is about 5 years. I then asked my colleagues from other departments, they got the same information. Those who implemented at the time that I did are planning, just as I am now, to present to their town councils for a recommitment to that equipment and re-implementation, or refunding, I should say. And finally, I asked Scott, and Scott's opinion, and I won't speak for him in this venue, but was basically that technology, especially that's being used on a daily basis in the environments that we're using it in, has a lifespan of around 5 years typically.
Another question: the storage, the footage that we're storing, how long do we have to keep that footage?
So it depends. If it's just a routine captured event, then we keep that footage for 90 days. If it has some evidentiary value, we can store it on an unlimited basis. Okay. The reason that we keep it for 90 days is because you really don't know if you're going to get a citizen complaint on a call for service, if somebody may not make that complaint or ask for footage for a month, 2 months, or up to 3. So we thought the standard out there, which when we developed our policy, we were really pretty new at it. We were the first agency in Connecticut, not the first agency to have body worn cameras, but the first to implement it throughout the entire agency. So we were going off a number of limited policies. 90 days seemed like a good timeline. Now, with that said, there are additional calls. If there's an accident involving a cruiser, if there's any type of town liability, we'll keep those records indefinitely because of the prospect for litigation. So we consulted with the town attorney, labor attorney, and said, what calls do you think we should keep that information for an unlimited amount of time? Okay. So we categorize that activity after we review the videos.
Okay, excellent. And just jumping ahead, the mobile units, is that for the dash cam on the cruisers?
Exactly. Those are the units inside the car. So the total replacement is a little over 200,000. We split it in 2 to put it over 2 years.
Okay, excellent.
So this is just the cameras that are on the officers' bodies, because that is what is mandated by law. And we wanted to make sure that we were keeping our standard high and making sure that all of our equipment functioned. The mobile video platform in the cruisers, while it's highly beneficial, is not mandated by state law.
Okay, excellent. Any other questions? Seeing none, let's keep going.
Thank you.
Yvette?
Okay, I think we're both going to have Dan Carter and Yvette talk about the need for the bus. So.
Okay. Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for this opportunity. We are asking for a replacement of our 30-passenger minibus. It is a 2007 vehicle. It's the oldest vehicle in the fleet. It has 126,000 miles, and we are. It is out, it's beyond its useful life, as well as the mileage is a recommendation. Would you like to know more?
That was good. that was
trying
quick.
to keep it simple. Just try to keep it simple. I mean,
that was way too quick. Counselor Wong, ask a lot of questions, Counselor.
Come on.
Madam Mayor, thanks, Yvette. I just had a quick question. I'm not the first to bring this up, but have we looked into electric options? And if so,
As a matter of fact, thank you for asking that question. Yes, we have. So we actually had a conversation with DPW, and we have had a conversation with one of our very dedicated volunteer citizens in the community with regard to our vehicles. We have mostly hybrid vehicles with the exception of 2 of them at this moment. And that is because one is a 30-passenger vehicle, which does not, at this moment, is not available in the 30-passenger size. The largest EV vehicle that's available is an 18-passenger. And then there are other vehicles with truck bases, but that would not provide the convenience, the comfort, the accessibility for those that are disabled, the grab bars on the seats that allow people to pull themselves up from the seat to get out and to get in. And in addition to that, the overall configuration of the vehicle, being able to carry wheelchairs, scooters, hold walkers, etc.
Do we know the cost for the 18-passenger hybrid?
We don't know. We're looking into it. We just found we've been actually researching and trying to get more information. We don't know what that cost is at this moment, but I can tell you that we don't need to replace an 18 or a 20-passenger vehicle right now. What we really desperately need is to replace the 30. When I spoke with the staff, the mechanical staff in DPW, I was told that beside the body of a 2007 vehicle that has some wear and tear, that the actual undercarriage has some corrosion damage. And it is also spending an awful lot of time visiting with the staff at DPW rather than with the passengers that we would like to be riding on it.
I think another thing to remember is that the EV or the hybrid vehicles that we have now were much more expensive than the standard gasoil/diesel buses, but we were able to get state grants. At that time, the state was supporting that, and so we were able to get the state grants to offset the increased cost and still get the hybrid vehicles.
Okay, thank you very much.
I'm going to go with Counselor Politis and then Counselor Goff.
Just real quickly, thank you, Madam Mayor. This is the same bus that we were asked to replace last year, is that correct?
Last year, we just wanted to replace a bus, just any bus we could get. But now this one has risen to the front of the line because of its undercarriage issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. So with that, two questions, I guess. The first one is just simply, can you sort of outline for us why it would be essential we had a 30-person bus? I mean, is it the case that we really just need a capacity? I mean, could we get by with 2 18-passenger? I don't know. You know, it sounds like you have different tasks or different things for the different sizes. So could you just talk about that for a second?
Yes, Councilor Goff, I'm so happy that you asked that question because we'd be happy to take 2 18-passenger vehicles so that we would have more space, but we're not able to transport right now without having 2 drivers. So if we had 2 18-passenger vehicles, we would need 2 drivers to drive that in order to carry the 30 passengers plus an additional 6. In addition to that, you have to take into consideration that every vehicle that the town Senior Services Department utilizes for transportation has to have accessibility. We've made a commitment to being accessible to every passenger that wants to get on that vehicle, whether it be by the lift, in a wheelchair, in a walker, cane, that we make it possible for every individual to be able to get on the vehicle and be able to be transported to their destination of choice. In COVID, we have found that even with a 30-passenger bus, we can only carry 7 individuals at any given time due to social distancing. Now, there is an expectation that at some point within the next month or so that those, or even sooner, so I've heard rumor of, that if there's a possibility that those 6-foot distancing, social distancing regulations may move down to 3. That being said, that would give us a little bit more space for transporting passengers. But even now, we're using that bus mostly in the highest area of the town that has the most senior housing. And many times a driver at a 9 o'clock shift will have to make multiple trips to various destinations in order to get all the people who want to go to the grocery store and other activities of daily living to a destination within a reasonable time frame. So having that bus in the past has also been an incredible asset when we're doing our day trips, which we would like to resume sometime maybe at the end of the year, if not for sure in 2022. But without having that ability, we would be required to either not provide the same or a similar level of socialization. Right now, we're dealing with a lot of individuals who are struggling and suffering with isolation and loneliness. It has been very hard. We have spent a lot of time trying to make wellness phone calls, sending out day brighteners, just little snacks and goodies, and creating programs and services that are trying to keep people connected through Zoom programming, hybrid programming, collaborations with other departments. I don't know if that answers your question.
Well, I see a lot of the reason. So excluding COVID and social distancing, which we all agree, we don't expect to go on forever. I certainly understand.
Correct.
Currently, the larger capacity of the bus, the more people you can get on it, because you can't use 2/3 of the seats or something. But in normal times, I guess what I'm asking is, how often do you actually need a 30-seat capacity bus? You made a comment about making lots of trips, but that is the bus full? I'm not saying it's not. I'm just trying to understand. Is that the issue?
So that's a question that we're often asked by individuals with regard to why there aren't people on the bus at any given time. And I think it's just the series of how the transportation system works. You pick up people in a variety of spaces, and then as you're heading back from the furthest area of town to the nearest area to the center of town, you're dropping people off and picking people up around the same time. At some point when you drop off your last passenger, the bus is going to be empty before you start your next run at 10, 11, 1, 2, or 3. So at any given time, at any moment, the bus could be full, it could be half full, or it could be totally empty, depending on where we are in the transportation schedule. And yes, you're right, Councillor Goff, that COVID is a different time, but it doesn't change the types of events and trips. Taking a busload of people for a simple trip, just going to the farmer's market, because Bloomfield doesn't have one at this time, is another trip that's been very, very popular. Going to Walmart. You can't go to Walmart and come back without bags. So we might only have 24 passengers on that bus, but without room for the wheelchair, which takes an additional 4 chairs out, and the packages, including a vacuum cleaner once that people bring back on that bus, because we're providing activities of daily living.
Mm-hmm. Okay, I'm just trying to understand not the issue with having buses, but the specifics of a 30-passenger bus as opposed to
it's specifically used for the higher traffic areas and the higher traffic days during the week. It's specifically used for day trips and travel. It is also used for special events, and it's pretty much used every day.
Mm-hmm. Okay, my other question, my follow-up on the comment that the manager made about the higher cost of hybrids. So is it anticipated, if given that the configuration, it doesn't sound like the configuration of even an 18 passenger bus is consistent with all of the needs of the senior population. so there's a configuration issue, as we heard with police cars also. Is it possible to buy a hybrid? Is a hybrid possible here? And if so, I guess one of my, not for tonight, but one of the questions would be, is that something that some of the COVID money could do to bridge that gap? The American Rescue.
I couldn't speak
Yeah.
to that.
No, no one
Councilor
can
Ruff,
yet.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But what I would say is that at this point, we are not able to get a hybrid vehicle beyond a 20-passenger vehicle.
Okay.
Right now, it's not available to us. We are open to various types of vehicles, hybrid, electric, whatever it is that's available, because we are also very conscious and interested in saving the environment. I have 2 fabulously adorable and wonderful grandchildren, and I want my children's children's children to be able to enjoy this country and this world. And so we are committed to doing whatever we can to make that possible for everyone, but it's not possible today. And today is when I'm looking to
get that
reach
bus.
out to you to secure the money so we can get that bus.
Yes. Thank you very much, Miss Yvette. You need a 30-passenger bus, and that's what you need.
Please,
today.
ma'am. Please, ma'am.
Today.
Madam Mayor, yes.
Councilor Curtin.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Mayor. Ms. Yvette, thank you. I think I was going to say a few things, but I think you touched on a lot of the things that I wanted to talk about in regards to the services that you provide and how important these buses are. And I'm happy to know that we're going to a 32 passenger bus, because what I hear from some of the seniors is sometimes difficult. I think you touched on a few things. We're talking about seniors here. So we're talking sometimes about having walkers. Seniors are getting onto the buses. If they're going shopping, they're bringing bags back on the bus. So I've heard from seniors before that it's very difficult, especially when you go to a complex, a retirement home, and you're trying to get seniors. They kind of work together. They want to go places, they want to go shopping, they want to go together. And what I've heard, the smaller buses didn't really accommodate that, the timing and all of that stuff. So I'm happy to know that we're moving towards that. I know that Bloomfield takes pride in how we take care of our seniors. So I'm happy, and I think this is a really good thing for making sure that we meet the needs of our seniors in the town. So, thank you for your continued service and dedication to committing to that whole process that I know Bloomfield as a whole really cares about.
Thank you so much, Councilor Curtin. I just wanted to clarify that we currently have a 30-passenger bus. We just want to replace the bus that we have.
Yes, ma'am.
Correct. Yep.
Okay. Thank you so very much. Could it be?
Yes.
It could be. It's finished. Excellent.
I think that completes the capital improvement program as we presented it. If there are any final questions, myself or the staff will be happy to answer them for you.
I see none. I see no hands. 8:58. And
Madam Mayor,
yes.
I will dare to interject just to, this is an opportunity to, for department heads, you're in front of the council. Is there anything else that you foresee that may be of,
They all have an opportunity to present. This was just their capital.
No, but I think it's budget. But I think it's just a recap on everything. Because once again, we don't do this often. We don't do this during the year. And I just want to know if there's anything else that of concern to you. You're in front of us now, and you have an opportunity with this capital budget that you would like to add. Just saying, just giving you the opportunity to do that. That's all.
I think they prepare based on what they're doing. So like when they come to their department budget, when they're really going to squeeze us for money, I think they have that script already. Okay. This was just the initial script. See, look at Jose. He's like, I got plans for them. Look at his face. You can tell by his face. Any questions, any concerns? So on behalf of the entire council, I would just like to say thank you to each department director. Thank you for the work that you've done during this trying time of COVID and racial unrest. Thank you for keeping our town safe. Thank you for keeping our seniors engaged. Thank you for making sure that our programs were still up to speed as much as possible. Thank you for being here tonight, way past your working hours, to present to the council the things that you think are most important as far as the capital improvement budget goes. We thank you for your time. We thank you for your attention. Most of all, we thank you for your service. Anything else? Do I need a motion? Nope. Good night, all.
Good night.